Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Books with Nate, and today I have a pretty exciting video for you, at least I think. It's a dual review of Legend by David Gemmel and The Magic of Recluce by Modesitt Jr. This is a non-spoiler review of both books. I'll just kind of go over my general thoughts, the plot, and just sort of help, give you an idea what these books are about. I wanted to make this video just because I've been wanting to get more into a bit older fantasy. The Legend was published in 1984, and Magic of Recluce was published in 1991. I know it's not like super old compared to other books, but these are books I don't really see that often on YouTube, and I was just happy to find them. I've seen Legend on YouTube a little bit, but other stuff not so much. But yeah, I just want to get into it and talk about it some more. So yeah, let's do it. So to start, we have Legend by David Gemmel. From what I understand about David Gemmel is that he's kind of the author's author for a lot of people. I think he's well known for his sort of heroic sort of British fantasy works. We follow Druce the Legend as he helps the Draenei sort of defend against insurmountable odds at this siege. Druce is sort of this exactly what it is. He's a legend, but he's kind of older, and he's won a lot of big famous battles, but we sort of see him kind of at his older state, and that's something I think I really appreciated about this book was that I feel like it takes a very realistic approach around heroism. And Druce, you can see sort of, this is spoilers, but you can sort of see his age throughout the book. And I just think when it comes to heroism, which is there, and it kind of has that sort of classic fantastical part of it, I do think that you see more of the realistic side of somebody being older and being a warrior. Yeah, no, I just appreciate that approach. And we also see essentially like what is a warrior monk society kind of come up, and there's sort of the soft magic system associated with them, and it's not super apparent what it is, but I think it's an interesting take on what it is. It's kind of almost a spiritual magic system, which I think is interesting for especially like a British 1980s fantasy. I just think that was sort of an interesting take on magic. So just to kind of touch on tone a little bit some more with this book. Again, it's heroic, so there's courage, there's great acts of service essentially, but ultimately these all come at a cost, versus I think kind of walking off scot-free. And that's something I really appreciate about this book. These characters aren't invincible, and all the characters felt very unique, especially for, I think it's like 300 pages. I would say expectation-wise, I was expecting it kind of go from like 0 to 100 real quick in terms of like the siege, but that's not exactly what happened. You don't really get to the siege until later on, and throughout that time, you're kind of seeing these characters grow. Even the older ones, they're growing in their own ways. And I just think in terms of expectations, that's something I think you should try and set yourself up for with this book. I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it like a 4.5 out of 5. But I mean, really, I would just recommend to read it if you want to sort of see like John Gwyn's influences. You can also see it throughout, just other authors who are kind of into this sort of heroic style fantasy, but it's also grim and human, not grimdark, but just it takes a realistic approach on what's happening, and that's something I appreciate about this book. So Legend by David Gemmel, I would recommend. So next up is The Magic of Recluce by Modesitt Jr. This is the first book in I think like a 25 book series that he's still writing. This was published in 1991. He's written a ton of other stuff. Yeah, I just decided to pick this up on a whim because it just seemed kind of interesting, and it seemed, I see it at the used bookstore that I go to all the time, and I was like, why not give it a shot? And I definitely didn't regret it. So Magic of Recluce follows sort of a young magician type character who starts off as a woodworker. He's an apprentice to his uncle, and he's not really good at it. He's not perfect at it, which is kind of the expectations in that society, and he sort of starts to reject it a little bit, but he's kind of also pushed out because he isn't in this sort of like perfect, orderly world. And so he kind of gets labeled as a danger gelder or something, and he essentially outcast by the sort of order government that is there. And then we kind of follow his journey that way. And I know it doesn't sound that interesting, but I think what stood out to me about this book was that the character Laris is a 25-year-old. He's not a teenager, and he's an adult who's essentially doesn't really know what he wants to do with his life, and he's kind of outcast. And you sort of see the hero's journey more from an adult perspective, as in like he's just an older person, and so he does have some more experience in life in general, but he also just doesn't really know what he wants to do. I know that he's not necessarily people's favorite. It's a first-person book, by the way, but I think it's because people think he, like expects a lot from the world. And I mean, maybe at the beginning, but throughout he really grows as a character. And, I think another issue people have with this book is that it's not very exciting. You follow a very simple sort of story, as in he goes from kind of A to B, or tries to, but it takes a year or two. He has a lot of experiences that are a little bit more, like if you were kind of lost and you just kind of went out into the world and tried to experience some stuff, that's essentially what happens to him, which I think was a really interesting premise, and I think it worked really well. So again, it's not slow, it's just, I think it takes a very human sort of approach to a main character, and that's just something I appreciate about the book. He's just not a perfect character. He's not a perfect person. He's just trying his best, and again, that's what I liked. Another thing I liked about the book was just how expansive it felt. You're really only seeing one person's perspective, but you're getting a lot of sort of information coming in from, the character goes to a lot of taverns on his journey, and he's kind of overhearing stuff, and they're talking about X, Y, or Z and stuff that you're not really seeing, which just kind of made me more intrigued about the world itself and wanting to read more about it. I think each book in this series kind of takes place all over the place, which there's kind of arcs, I think, but that's just something that seemed really interesting and intriguing about this series. And yeah, it just felt like a very lived-in world that you were exploring, which was just really cool to see, and I really liked the world that it's in. It ultimately just felt like a journey, and I think that's just something I was missing in my fantasy. Just a kind of like low stakes journey, not cozy fantasy, but it just felt kind of low stakes, which was just kind of nice to read. There definitely were some lulls in this book. There's some points where I was kind of skimming over. Sometimes the writing wasn't great or consistent. He does a lot of sound effect writing, which is sometimes okay, but it just kind of got over the top. And the plot, like when he was writing the plot, it could be a little jumpy and unclear as to what was happening after some pretty like consistently simple prose, which is fine. I just mean like in terms of like, it's just kind of like, wait, what? Like, what's going on? Because you're kind of following it, and then something would happen. You're like, wait, you did not lay this out well, and I was kind of taking it lightly. Another thing was the magic system, and to touch on the magic system, it's essentially like good versus evil, kind of, order versus chaos. However, order has the bad sides to it. You can kind of become an order master, and it's pretty defensive usually, and then there's chaos, which is kind of self-explanatory, but you can kind of do anything with them, but it's also cyclical, so they kind of feed off of each other, which I think is interesting. There's, chaos masters And then there's gray wizards, and they can kind of use both. So yeah, it doesn't really take a hard stance on either one. Yeah, it definitely has sort of the good and evil aspect of it, but the magic system was interesting. It was just not super well explained or portrayed. It was always a little confusing, to be honest. So yeah, overall, I would recommend this book if you're looking for sort of a low stakes fantasy book that kind of has a unique take on a hero's journey, or just like a nicer, like simpler take on a hero's journey. I just really enjoyed it for the most part. I definitely plan to continue the series. I wouldn't say it's for everyone. Sometimes Laris, the character, says some things where I'm like, dude. And then it's revealed later on that, it's like, oh, it's all fine. But I was like, dude, really? Anyways, so yeah, there's some issues with the book. It's not, like horrendously bad in any way. It's just sometimes the language that's used is like, come on, bud. But overall, yeah, I enjoyed it. I plan to continue it. I would recommend it for sure. I gave it, I don't know, it's not like perfect, but like 3.5 to 4. Like, it's good. I liked it. It had issues, but I'm going to continue it for sure. So that's it from me today. I'm really happy I made this review, sort of dual review, non-spoiler review. I hope you enjoyed it as well. I hope you were interested in these books potentially. I plan to continue reading books by these authors. Yeah, just let me know what you think in the comments down below. Have you read these? What are some other recommendations you have for like 80s, 90s fantasy? And yeah, make sure to like and subscribe if you want. And I will talk to you soon.